Okay, thank you. I guess first of all, I'd just like to say thanks. These kinds of events are a little unsettling, so I'll do my best to hang together. There'll be various points in time when I'll talk about some things that probably 30 years ago would have rolled off my back and I would have been a tough guy about, but they become harder to be tough guy as you get smarter as opposed to dumber. Second of all, if there are places in my conversation that it seems like I'm, I don't know, throwing some shade some people's way, that's not the intent. They're just my perceptions of sort of parts of my life. And so from that particular standpoint, I've made my peace with them. So there's no reason you guys need to think that I'm judging or blaming or anything. I own full responsibility for this script. As I tried to think about what I wanted to talk about, I like to have sort of an architecture that holds things together, that allows me to sort of put pieces in place. And so when I was thinking about it, faith-based kind of thing, the narrative that popped into my head was this idea of triune, right? You got Father, you got Son, and you have Spirit. And when I reflected on it a little bit, it was kind of crazy because in some ways it mapped three significant parts of my sort of faith journey. And let's start with the obvious part. And the obvious part is you guys are like light years ahead of me. When I was your age, faith would have been like the farthest thing from my planet. It wasn't like I was a regular church or anything like that. And which sort of speaks to the father stage of the triune. I grew up in a family that started out as a pretty much normal nuclear family. I was born in New York, Brooklyn. We lived there till I was about 7 or 8 years old. Family was growing in size. It was time to, city wasn't going to work for a larger family. So circumstances had us move back to where my mom and dad had grown up, which was like northeastern Pennsylvania, Wilkes-Barre, Scranton area, for those that are familiar with Jesuit schools in Scranton. But that issue aside, the move was traumatic in the sense that my dad worked in New York City and we lived in Pennsylvania. So essentially he was away. Maybe he'd come in typically every weekend and we'd see him then. But he lived a lifestyle in New York City by himself, and I think in some ways put him on a path that was really pretty destructive. Long and short of it, he became an alcoholic. When he was around us, it wasn't very clear that he wanted to be around us. And so from that particular standpoint, I was growing up with a dad that I really didn't have a very good relationship with. And it only sort of deteriorated over time. Deteriorated to the point that, like when he died, I didn't even go to his funeral. I was at school, I had a bunch of convenient reasons not to go. I was busy, I had work to do. Frankly, I didn't care. And so it was just a very awkward, and in some ways it shaped sort of how I viewed being a man at that particular time. And I'll throw some love out there to Simon and Garfunkel for a song called I Am a Rock. There's some verbiage in there that I thought captured who I was. Stanza that goes, I built walls, a fortress steep and mighty that none may penetrate. I have no need of friendship. Friendship causes pain. It's laughter and it's loving I disdain. I was just walled off. I was probably hurt and angry, felt unloved, all that kind of stuff. But in the big scheme of things, my way of dealing with it was I will not allow anybody to have access to anything that can hurt me. Walled off. And in some ways I probably blamed him, but I never really thought deeply about it. And then, higher authority decided it was time for me to take a little step in my growth. And it was during my time here, I went on one of the annotated retreats. So you're doing sort of the spiritual exercises over an extended period of time. And it forces you to reflect on all kinds of stuff. And it was at that, one of those retreats that I came to realize that the person that I hated the most when he died was the one who gave me my greatest gift. My mom was Protestant. My dad was Catholic. So at that time, if you were married in the church, the non-Catholic one had to promise that they were going to raise the child, their children, if you will, in the faith. And so it was my mom that made us go to church. We did all that kind of stuff. Dad would never be seen in a church, but that was a separate conversation. So at some very basic level here, something that was so core to me, or had become core to me, was a gift from a person that I didn't even think had any use in my life, which was kind of an interesting plot twist, I thought, because I think it's very easy for us to judge people, not understand why they're here, what they're doing, but it allowed me to sort of grow in the area of forgiveness, which was kind of an interesting thing, because I would have never been something that I would have thought of in terms of my relationship with him. And so I've made my peace with it. It's kind of cool in the sense, I had a realization when I was thinking about it today, that so what's the day of the year that's most commonly associated with gifts? Christmas. My dad's birthday was Christmas Day. So it's kind of an interesting, it was just one of those things that just weirdly popped in today, and I go, well, that's kind of weird. I get a lot of these weird things when I spend time thinking about things. But in any event, that issue aside. So that first stage, Act 1, was the father piece of the puzzle, which then leads into sort of Act 2, which is the son. I was married at the time. We were at an age that was probably late for children. I really had no interest in having children simply because, probably a little bit because of my personal experience. I was self-absorbed in a lot of ways, and didn't really think about that. And so I was in this marriage, and we were already planning for all the things we were going to be able to do when my wife's 2 children were gone. So it's like you got all these plans, you're making plans, and out of the blue, we find out that the plans had changed. We were going to have a child, which was kind of fascinating. I will always make the comment that I'm not sure that I was put on the planet to help Tyler grow up, or Tyler was put on the planet to help me grow up. But what he did was to put me on another path, a path to start to understand a little bit better this idea of unconditional love. I had, I don't know, crazy views, I guess. I think we all do have different views of what relationships should be like, and I think a lot of them tend to be judging kinds of things. So on net, is this person positive or negative? What do I get? What do I gain? Sort of very transactional kinds of things. Tyler flipped the switch, totally. My entire experience in a lot of ways sort of tied back to my dad in the sense that as I thought about it, it was like, well, I'm going to become the dad that I wished I had. And so we were like joined at the hip. For the longest time, well, he ran this place. There are people around here that have been here a long time will tell you that there wasn't a place on this campus or a person that didn't know him because of his fingerprints all over it, which was kind of cool. He would even work like orientations with me. He'd answer questions that I'd pose to him to help the students. And it was a great personal growth experience. It was an opportunity, and there was one particular signature event that I sort of crystallized a whole bunch of things, like sort of role of God in your life kinds of things for me. It would have been August the 6th, 1996. It was about 90 degrees out, a very, very hot day. It had been hot all day. Tyler at the time would have been 4. He went to preschool over at the Jewish Day Nursery, which is on right by Belfair. As I always describe it, that was his Old Testament phase. And he would come back on Friday afternoons and be Baruch Atah Adonai. We'd be doing Shabbat and all this kind of stuff. It was kind of cool. But in any event, so I'd pick him up typically at about 3:30. And that particular day, at the time, he had this fascination with these little action figures that you'd buy in these 25-cent gumball machines. And so he wanted to go get one. So we drove from Jewish Day Nursery. We went to the Revco, or what was Revco at the time, CVS over by Green Road, right behind the not Speedway station there. Okay, and so we get out of the car, and we're starting to walk through the parking lot. Good dad that I was, and good boy that he was. We're holding hands, and for some reason, out of the blue, he said, "Dad, I love you." And so my instinctive reaction was to pick him up, give him a hug, which I did. In a matter of about 10 seconds, we were on the hood of a car. Some old guy, I guess, got confused. I don't know. All I can remember is us being on the hood of the car, and it was like one of these scenes in a movie where things are happening in slow motion and you're trying to figure out how this is all going to play out. And all I kept thinking to myself is, we're coming off the hood of the car. He can't hit first. That was all I knew. But it was like this, and I can still see it. It's like this time-lapse photography in my crazy head. As luck would have it, I hit first, banged my head, so minimal damage. Scraped up his shoulder, but he was fine. And the thought was, like, what if he had never said that? Because he was like in between. He's a 4-year-old, right? So this is going to be car hitting him, then hitting me. And it was just one of those things that, I guess it could be a coincidence. I mean, you can go through life believing everything's a coincidence. You can go through life believing nothing's a coincidence. I'm a nothing believer, quite honestly. So in that particular setting, so we get to share a, ride in an emergency vehicle, which is kind of cool. He enjoyed it. Had a lot of great stories to tell about it. But it was just one of those moments where, it's like you realize how blessed you are in some sense. You realize that how important certain kinds of things are to you. So from that particular standpoint, that was like my second phase of this sort of personal narrative, where stage 1, father, was sort of all about the idea of forgiveness and understanding that sometimes your greatest gifts are going to come from your most unlikely sources. People that you think are offering nothing to you are giving you things that, in the big scheme of things, are probably more important than you can ever imagine. And then my next narrative stage was the son. The son piece of it was the ability to sort of at least experience this idea of what unconditional love means. I mean, we think of it, or we hear about it in Gospels and sermons on it and all the rest, but operationalizing it at a day-to-day level is challenging. You'll find out, I think, at some point, because it's just so easy to judge, and it's so easy to weigh cost and benefits of friends and relationships and all that sort of stuff, and the ability to just say, I don't care what happens. Nothing you can do can change how I'm going to feel about you. He never understood that. He will when he has a son or daughter. But for the time being, that was a lesson, that was sort of Act 2, which then sort of brings us to Act 3. It's one thing to be able to love unconditionally for family members. To broaden that out to other people, I think, is sort of a real test. and certainly it's a test that I undergo all the time. About 4 years ago, at a social setting, I got involved in a conversation with a person. I knew their name, but didn't really know much about them. We proceeded to talk that particular day and had interactions subsequent to that. Coffees, just conversations, just learning about each other to some degree. As this particular relationship involved, and I'm calling this sort of my spirit stage, because when I think of the spirit, I think of this idea of God in action on the planet. So whether it's like, how do we manifest what we're being sort of called to do and how we treat people? And we're always told that we're supposed to be loving unconditionally and taking care of the marginalized and doing all of that, and we sort of make our peace with it in varying degrees, or enough to convince ourselves that we're like really good people. So in any event, as this conversation and this relationship, friendship really starts to develop, I come to find out that this particular person, who was married and had a family, was in an incredibly, at least to my way of thinking, abusive relationship. A lot of psychological abuse. I'm not sure physical abuse, but I'm not sure that really matters at some level. It was certainly apparent to me that they weren't in a good place. They weren't in a healthy place. And I can remember at the time and over time thinking that it's my job to be there for them unconditionally, whatever they need. Doesn't matter what time the phone rings, it doesn't matter what's going on. If they reach out, I have to be there. And it's been a roller coaster for the last 4 years. I never know when the phone's going to ring. I never know what the drama's going to be. There's been some positive changes in that particular regard. But in the big scheme of things, it's this idea that it's not about me. I think it's like the first time I ever felt that I stood in solidarity with somebody that wasn't necessarily a family member. Because you can rationalize that pretty easily. But this person obviously still struggles with a lot of issues. Fortunately for them, they're in a better place. They're outside of that relationship. But a lot of the day-to-day still gets sort of framed by that, because I don't think it ever goes away. I try not to judge or offer advice simply because I don't know. I didn't live the experience. But at the same point in time, it colors everything that takes place. And so they could be oftentimes very combative. There's not a time that they're not back in my face about something. And the easy part would have been, at some point, that would have been something I would have just walked away from and said, goodbye. Why do I need this? I don't know. Why do I need this aggravation in my life? But it's not really aggravation. It's just the ability to, I don't know, sort of, I guess the big plan forced me to go on an internship to say, well, you think you understand this unconditional love? Well, we're going to put you in a place where we're going to test it on a regular basis. It's been like the most, at some level, the most rewarding thing I've ever done. Simply because it's something I took on sort of voluntarily. But at another level, it's been like the most challenging. It forces me to, on a daily basis, look at this idea of why are you doing this? And understand my motivations for doing it. It's deep into my prayer life. God knows I pray more now than I ever have. But that said, it's been an incredibly powerful chance for me to grow sort of in this third act. So I got my father piece of the puzzle, I got my son piece of the puzzle, and now I have my spirit piece of the puzzle. I don't know what the future holds. I have no clue. I do know that it's safe to say that whatever plan is involved isn't going to be my plan. And I guess as I was trying to think about sort of parting advice for you guys, it would be tied to the idea that, take a slight diversion. My undergraduate experience lasted about 9 years. It involved changes of majors, running out of money, taking time off from school, not really being sure what the heck I was going to do. And so if somebody would have told me at 18 years old that this is what your college experience was going to be like, the one that I had, it's like, it would have been like, why the heck should I go to college? But looking back from where I am now, maybe it was really like a bundled thing where I have an undergraduate experience like you guys have, and I have a college experience like I've had here. And so the gift of my college experience here, you've given me an experience that I didn't have, and taught me in so many ways and showed me so many experiences that I couldn't thank you guys enough. But it wouldn't have been my plan at any shape. And so I guess if I was going to offer advice to the people in the audience, it would be to don't be afraid to take your fingers off the steering wheel and trust that there's bigger plans in place. And they're probably a lot better than you can even begin to imagine. My narrative has been, when I went back for my 20th high school reunion, I think Leah was nice enough to share that I graduated from Penn State. Probably the people were surprised in the sense they thought I would have been more likely to end up in State Penn rather than Penn State. But so from that particular standpoint, it's not a life that I would have ever imagined, but at another level, it's better than anything I could have imagined. And so don't feel the need to own it, just feel the need to live it. Don't worry about being in the right place, just be concerned about staying in the right moment, because I think that's where it all happens. And I think with that, I'll open it up to any places you guys want to poke me with questions. I didn't want to throw a wet blanket over the room here. Go for it, please.
Would you say that building your faith with God helped you figure out what you want to do career-wise?
It's an interesting question. My faith life really didn't grow until I landed in the right place, surrounded by the right people. So I would consider my faith life to have been most profoundly impacted by this place. Arriving here, it wasn't like I was a practicing Catholic. It wasn't like I paid much attention to that stuff. I was just sort of living my own little world. And this place has a way of growing on you. You're surrounded by a bunch of people who are genuinely caring people and realize that they've been sort of blessed with some gifts and are happy to share those gifts, which I think is powerful. It's like I don't know if, it's kind of funny. I regularly see alums back and all the rest, and they'll talk about my mentoring role, and I can never figure out if they mentored me or I mentored them, because as much as I feel like I've given to students, I've gotten so much more back in return. And I would not be at my faith place now if it wasn't for the community I was in. That wasn't going to happen. If I had gone to another university to teach, I could have won, I don't know, as many awards, I could have been all of that stuff, but I wouldn't be the person I am. And so I owe that to, I guess, the Jesuits to some degree. They're okay in their own way. Other questions, please. Go for it.
I think it's safe to say that your legacy here is that you're omnipresent. How do you do it? How are you everywhere all the time, but still manage to give your all to everything?
Well, there's a theory that I have like a cot in my ceiling tiles. Well, I guess I'm at a stage of life with a level of commitments and a son that lives in other places that allows me some freedom. What's kind of funny is that I think it's natural for you to, at various points in time, to want to spend time with your family and your loved ones. And so this place has given me a surrogate family. The ability to sort of have a college experience and share things with all the various groups that I tend to interact with is incredibly powerful. You know, it's funny in the sense that when we think of faculty members, they see themselves as being judged by their research and the books that they write and all that crap. But it's lives that you touch. I had an advisor in college that saw something in me that I didn't see and put me on a path to graduate school. So I mean, here's the narrative. I've been in college like 9 years. I'm finishing up. I have a job lined up, and this particular advisor. And so let me rewind it a little, put it in context. Prior to running out of money in my junior year and taking time off, if you would have looked at my undergraduate transcript, I was probably like a 2.1 student. I was working full time. I wasn't connected. I was in the wrong major. I didn't have any social infrastructure to help me understand how to succeed in college. After the year off, I came back a little bit better oriented, landed into a right subject area, met some great people. They proceeded to take me under their wing and coach me up. And so like pre-break, it was like a 2-1. Post-break, it was like a 4-0. So they probably thought I got my meds straightened out or something. And so the people that saw me post were the advocates for grad school. And so I was, 27 at the time? And I got a job lined up, and only out of a favor to my advisor did I apply to grad schools. Applied to 2, I was accepted at both. Couldn't understand why. And now I'm going, okay, so now what do you do? And I thought to myself, well, if I go to grad school, that'll probably take about 4 years, so I'll be 31 when that happens. Then I thought, well, if I don't go to grad school in 4 years, I'm going to be the same age. And I came to a realization that I didn't want to go through life with wonder. I didn't want to be 40 years old saying, I wonder what the hell my life would have been like if I had done that. So my advice always to anyone pondering choices is you always go through the door that's only going to open one time. I don't know what's going to be on the other side, but I think you need to find out. Because if you choose not to, you just run the risk of never knowing. And what you'll, I guess I've come to believe that you can probably always go back to where you were. So it's not like you're really taking this great leap of faith, but at the same point in time, you do need to go the paths that are only going to be one-time kinds of paths, because there's probably a reason that you're being told to go there. And so from my standpoint, that's how it sort of worked out. But as sort of as a tribute to that particular advisor who changed my life, my way of paying him back is to be available to help others. So as a result, I end up with lots of advisees, formal and informal, but that's okay. It doesn't bother me. I love that.